Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another Friday Night Live show. I have Travis and Nick with me. So the whole team is together here today. Be sure and post burning questions down there in the comment section below. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure and wait for it to come out on the podcast channel and then just give it another listen. And if you're listening on the podcast channel, hey, there's a video too that may make more sense when you actually watch the video. So with that out of the way, let's just dive right into the news. So the Ram 1500, what do we think about the 3-liter turbo? Want to go first, Nick?
I like the idea. Unfortunately, I have seen a video already of some engine issues going on. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Every time a new motor comes out, there's always those few initial trucks that may have problems. I know Ford had that with some EcoBoost early on, and Toyota with the turbos on their 3-liter twin turbo or 3.5 liter. Sorry. And so we'll see. I like the idea. It's really exciting that we're going in a different direction than just V8 for Dodge or Ram. Sorry. So we'll see. I like the idea. We're just going to see the execution unfold here in the coming months, coming years, and we'll see.
Yeah, so Travis and I were the ones actually down there in Austin. So Travis, what did you think about the very BMW-like sound of that engine?
Honestly, it's not one that bothers me. I do understand the want for the big burly V8, but when it comes down to the numbers, and the numbers are all better with the turbo V6, I would probably be one to sacrifice sound for just that little extra pulling power, savings at the pump. Really, if you're doing a lot of hauling, I know if you're doing a lot of downhill stuff, you might want a little bigger displacement, but I would take it, especially in the top end truck, because that's really about cruising. And if you're cruising, you want to be comfortable, and a quiet cabin's part of that. So having things being turned down just a little bit, not a problem for me.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by Ram's decision to not keep the 5.7 around or any V8, which does make this the first American half-ton truck that has gone without a V8 completely. Because Ford, of course, went all in on the EcoBoost. They claimed that that was the future, but the 5-liter V8 is still around in their lineup. Chevy's been making tiptoes in the water with a 4-cylinder pickup truck in this segment. It's the only 4-cylinder, of course. And then, Toyota killed the V8 in this generation Tundra. We know that the Titan is not long for the world, so we just probably need to forget about that one. So it is really an interesting twist that Ram has really been so associated with that Hemi, and they spent so many decades marketing Hemi that now they're going to try and shift to Hurricane. My next thought here is somewhat on that reliability standpoint. Any predictions? How good or how bad do we think this is really going to go? I mean, every engine's going to have one teething problem initially. How do you think this rollout's really going to go?
I think the biggest question is it really going to deter people from buying it in the first place? But when it comes to turbos, there's this thing about lower displacement turbo. There's no way that engine is going to last. And I think we've had some of these discussions amongst us is who's buying the new truck? Because the person worried about 300,000 miles of longevity is likely not the first owner. It's probably owner 6, 7, 8. There's going to be a one-off, and by all means, do your thing. But even if you have to replace an engine at 200,000 miles, I feel like you've definitely got what you paid for. So I know 20 years ago, those turbos are different. And 20 years ago is where we're getting our 250,000 mile, comparisons. So I'm honestly not too concerned. A lot of these manufacturers are on the conservative side of engineering. They want to make sure that their product doesn't crap out in 100, 150,000, 200,000 miles. I'm not too worried about it. And especially if I was buying that new truck, I'd have zero concern, because what are the chances I'm owning that truck for 150,000 miles? It's not very high.
Yeah. There's that realistic side there. I think, I don't know about you, Nick, but I think my worry is not necessarily the turbos itself. I think that, bearing in mind Stellantis, the conglomerate that owns Chrysler, Ram, Dodge, etc. Stellantis is not overly known for fantastic reliability. So my worry is not necessarily the engine or the transmission. I think those will be fine. Like Pentastar went off without a hitch, all things considered. I think it's all the other stuff.
Yeah. There's a lot that can go wrong in these trucks now. what I am concerned about is that the Ram for the longest time had that 5.7. The 5.7 was a great motor when it was doing its job. Now there was a lot of issues with the cams flattening out. My dad actually had that exact problem on his truck.
Mhm.
And so it seems like a issue that they had for years and years and years, and they just never seemed to get it right. But it didn't really deter people from getting a truck
Yeah.
with that motor.
And it didn't
So to
necessarily
kind of
cause a functional problem, like, are you talking about the tick? Like the classic Hemi tick?
yeah, so the way they had
Yeah.
their oil, I'm gonna speak in layman's terms because I personally am not like a super in-depth motor knowledge, but the way they lubricated the cams on,
Mhm.
since they had that variable shut off,
Yeah.
it'd go from 8 cylinders to 4 cylinders.
Mhm.
What would happen is those cams would somehow get starved of oil and they'd end up, actually, sorry,
Yep.
there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Long story short, the cams flatten out and then that
Yeah.
doesn't work. And then when the cams go bad, the roller, God, I am just blanking on my knowledge of engines right now. Long story short, my dad had to replace his whole entire motor or rebuild it.
Yeah.
It was $11,000 for a like brand new from the factory 5.7 in a 2008 truck or 2012 truck.
Mm.
Not
Did he
worth
buy
it.
that one new, or did he buy it used?
He bought it in 2014, so he bought
Okay.
it pretty much brand new, just a couple years old, maybe 10, 20,000 miles, and it was a very, very stout truck for, I mean, I think he's got 120,000 miles on it right now, and then this started happening. Now, keep in mind, my dad is the type of guy where if it's not broken, he's just gonna keep driving it.
Mhm.
So there was these ticking noises. The engine started losing performance, and he finally, once the engine started like throwing codes and started not working properly, that's when he started paying attention. So if there was some preventative maintenance, he's definitely from
Mm.
the era where you don't change the transmission fluid, differential fluid,
Oh.
oil every God knows
Mm.
how when. But so
Yeah.
that could be that. But I have heard some horror stories on
Mm.
forums, doing research for him. So to sum it all up, I hope that this Hurricane motor is reliable, and I hope it makes the power it says it will and gets the economy they say
Mhm.
it will. Because it is a very exciting alternative to a V8, naturally aspirated V8.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll
I'm
see how Ram pulls it off.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I will say that we are accused of glossing over reliability. To that I will tell people, when you actually look at viewer surveys, customer surveys of people that are actually buying brand new vehicles. I know that our audience is a mix of car enthusiasts, of new car shoppers, of people that are just interested in the industry, et cetera. But when you look at research studies that are asking new car shoppers, what are you buying and why are you buying it? Reliability is not as high on the list as you would think. Also, not as high on the list as you might think, safety, strangely enough. Generally speaking, styling and performance rank above both of those two options. And
Mm.
that is perfectly rational, because if reliability was the key thing that every shopper was interested in, I mean, Land Rover and Jaguar and, Stellantis would be out of business, right?
Yeah.
If you want the most reliable half-ton truck, it's not going to have a Ram logo on the front or a Chevy logo on the front. I mean, it's probably going to be the Toyota, but you're going to give up some of the features and functions that the others offer. You're not going to find leather stitched dashboard parts and 540 horsepower turbocharged engines in the more reliable entries. So there's always a weighing of pros and cons. Which feature is it that you're interested in? And customers speak with their dollars, and those dollars say that Ram outsells Toyota by more than 2 to 1. So
Yeah. If it
in the
wasn't,
Well,
half-ton
part of
segment,
that's going to be the
yeah,
affordability because that
yeah,
Toyota is not going to be the cheapest option either.
right.
yeah.
And none of these things are that affordable, I would say, which is a problem for a little bit later in this episode that we should get back to. But moving on to our first viewer question here, POTUS is asking, any idea when the EX90 would release? I don't know if you've heard any rumors, Travis, but no rumors that I have heard coming out of Volvo on that. It appears that there have been some software issues and delays internally.
Mm.
And Volvo, being a fairly conservative company when it comes to these, they decided that their last infotainment overhaul, when Census first came out, that didn't go quite how they wanted it to go. So it seems like they're being really cautious about this, and they don't want to release the software with bugs. which I guess is good for everybody. But it means that not only is EX90 delayed, but Polestar 3 is delayed, and EX30 is also delayed. So, as far as I understand it from the connections I have inside Volvo in Sweden, the cars are all ready, and the production, as far as actually making the cars, seems to be ready to spin up. It just seems to be working through the software details and making sure everything is as smooth as they would like it on that one.
Yeah, I mean the EX30 and the EX90 were sitting here waiting in the wings, and things have been pretty quiet about it. So, unfortunately, we don't have a better answer, but we want to see it just as much as everyone else.
Yeah. So this is an interesting question here on the Ineos Grenadier. So neither of you have driven it yet because it's in my hot little paws right now. But hopefully
we'll steal it away at some point.
Hopefully we'll have some sort of meeting of the minds. Maybe we'll drive it to the Pacific Northwest and do some videos around it. But yeah, Ineos Grenadier, by the way, they just announced a new Fusilier. We'll talk about their naming scheme later. But they released a new Fusilier today, and Grenadier is currently on sale in the US. So better off-road than Defender, Wrangler, or G-Wagon. I would say this is a very controversial question because I had this argument recently with a friend of mine that is an absolute avid Land Rover guy. Land Cruiser guy. And the Ineos Grenadier, by its nature and design, is much more of an off-road vehicle than Defender or G-Wagon, current Defender. And it's much more like Wrangler because it has a solid front axle, it has a solid rear axle, it has a body-on-frame design. Everything about the Grenadier is very off-road focused. This is one of the most off-road focused new vehicles you can buy in America today. And I would say that the Wrangler is going to be a little bit more off-road capable depending on what you're after because of its different dimensions. It's a little bit smaller than the Grenadier. But as far as intrinsic baked-in capability, Grenadier is up there, I would say, beyond Bronco as far as from the factory capability when you're comparing like for like. G-Wagon has an independent front suspension. Defender doesn't have a front locker. It's a unibody vehicle. It has a fully independent suspension now. So it's just a very different kind of vehicle. The reality, though, is that nobody that I know of has an off-road vehicle outside of a side-by-side or some beat-up car that's 10 years old that is just for off-road use. I have a Grand Cherokee that's been lifted and, is not street legal and has, body damage all over it because trees have hit it. And it only lives off-road, but I didn't buy it new. I mean, it was very old when I got it. So that is the weird thing about the Grenadier, is that it is this very off-road focused thing that gives up so much in on-road capability because of that. I mean, Wrangler still has a solid front axle, but they've had billions of dollars and decades and decades and decades to try and make that front axle as good as it possibly can be. And I know people that are like, I won't buy a Wrangler because of the death wobble. The death wobble always comes up in forums. You know what? If you want a solid front axle, that's what you have to live with. And it's going to be the same thing intrinsically by design in something like the Grenadier. Bronco's going to be better on-road. Defender's going to be better on-road. G-Wagon's going to be better on-road. But if you want a solid axle thing with basically tractor axles and recirculating ball steering that has zero feedback from any bump in the road, I mean, that's kind of it. So, the problem is, we don't drive vehicles like that. I mean, how much time do you spend off-road, Nick? You spend more time off-road, I think, than either of us.
I have in the past. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like,
yeah.
how many, what would you say your percentage of time, even when you were hardcore going into it?
Obviously not as much as my wallet said I did, but I spent, every other weekend we'd go out to Eastern Washington and go off-roading, but it's definitely like 2% of the ownership I've been off-road. Now, with that being said, now if you plan like a lot of trips, like maybe 2 trips a year, where you're like weeks off-road, which I have done, it definitely, you can sacrifice a little on-road capability, which I have on my vehicle with bigger tires and stuff. But it's definitely no one's off-roading as much as they make it look like. That's just, and up here in the Pacific Northwest, Travis, I don't know if it's like that down in Southern Washington, but it's the people make it look like they are off-road 95% of the time with all of the expensive gear they have on there. So, and it just gets even
They
crazier
live
now.
off road, they work off road.
Yeah.
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 Well, it all comes at a cost, not just
Yeah.
the dollar cost, but there's the compromise. And
Yes, exactly.
the Grenadier is a very minimally compromised off-road vehicle, which means it's a massively compromised on-road vehicle.
Exactly.
And the unique part there is that the cost is so specific. You know, Alex, you mentioned the side-by-side. I'll tell you what I'd do. I would go buy a truck, a beautiful trailer, and a side-by-side for the cost of a fully loaded Grenadier, and then I go do everything the Grenadier is doing off-road in most cases.
Yeah, that's tricky for me.
But it's a unique market, and there is a market.
I do like my fully enclosed cabin, and I like my air conditioning, because you will never find me in a desert in a side-by-side. I would rather die. Rainy, wet weather, snow in a side-by-side every day. Hot weather, absolutely not. No desert in a side-by-side.
That's the fun, getting the dirt
I'd
off
rather
the
have
shorts.
frostbite. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
I'd lose a few toes before I did that one. So, any updates on our long-term Outlander plug-in hybrid? That is a good question. We actually do have some update videos coming soon. So, Travis, roll us through your experience, because you drove it up to Washington
and back. Yeah, I spent some time with the Outlander, and I had it when it snowed here. So there are a couple of videos. Apologies on my end, everyone. I'm still figuring out this whole editing thing. So I've got a couple in the wings. We'll get them out there. But I'll tell you what, 13 hours, each way, basically, to and from, is a lot of time to spend in a car. And if it's no good, that's a horrible trip. But I was pleasantly surprised just how manageable it all was. It's the biggest vehicle that I have in my driveway on a regular basis. But it's still in that mid-size SUV category. We never ended up using rear seats, but they were there in a pinch. And, I got to give it kind of its last hurrah. The Grenadier's here, so something has to go, but it was a good time. I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. The fuel economy, you got better fuel economy, obviously, on your trip than we averaged, generally speaking, because you were driving a bit slower than average. But on your way back, what did you average? I forget, on that return trip back to California.
Yeah, it was honestly, it was right about 26, and the rating there is I think it's literally 26 city, 26 highway, 26 in the middle,
right around there,
combined. And the problem, as we've talked about, is trying to figure out exactly what your fuel economy is because of the funky computer system. And it's not helpful to anyone, I don't think. If I wanted a number, I had to calculate my electricity, do that separately, figure out roughly the mileage. It tells you your average on the efficiency for the electric mode. So you have to subtract that out and then add this one back in. But honestly, right around 26, at best, we were shooting around 28. But around town, when I had it for, about a month, I used very little gas except for when I was testing it to see what it would do on gasoline alone.
Yeah, and that is really that trade-off. It's efficiency is not the Outlander's strong suit at all. I've had this theoretical discussion with a number of viewers. We have this contingent of Canadian viewers that love the Outlander. It does sell very, very, very well in Canada, interestingly enough. Maybe because it actually is very good off-road and in the snow. But fuel economy is not its strong suit. It is 26 miles per gallon rated by Mitsubishi themselves. They're the ones that certify the numbers and submit them to the EPA, etc. And it's not overly efficient on electricity either. Like, any way you slice it, a RAV4 Prime is going to give you, better fuel economy on gas, better fuel economy on electricity. But the Outlander is going to be less expensive, and it's easier to find, because the RAV4 Prime, at least in this area, I was shocked to discover, calling around to some local dealers, there are some that are still trying to charge a $5,000 markup on them, if you can get one.
And don't make started with used. You're paying new prices or more still.
Yeah, so if you want a screaming deal on a plug-in hybrid that has sort of 7 seats, hey, hit us up, because ours will be on the market soon. So there's our shill for the moment.
And it's got the light gray interior, and
Has the light gray
honestly,
interior,
it
which
is
is the
hard
way
to
to
go
go.
wrong with the light gray interior.
Yeah. I will say
Yeah.
that my opinions on it tend to be mixed because the efficiency part offends me to my core somehow. But everything else about the Outlander I actually think is really well done. Like the third row is tiny, but I think it's good that it has it. I actually wish that RAV4 and CRV also offered a tiny third row, because if you need one in a pinch and you don't have one, it sucks to not have one. And we have actually used it in the Outlander like twice. But it was handy. It's like you're at lunch, nobody else has a 6-passenger vehicle, and you're like, it's okay. Someone, the small person can squeeze in the back.
Slide that second row forward.
Yeah,
It'll be okay.
be fine. It's not like a road trip 3-row. And truthfully, we don't use much gas. Like the car just has not burned much gasoline over its lifetime with us because it's always running on electricity. So that definitely is there. The seats are very comfortable, as we both noted. So long road trips definitely a big advantage. I think the interior is attractive. What do you guys think of the exterior design? That sort of spider-like 8-eye headlight thing going on.
I'm not
Not a fan?
super. I'm not a fan of it, but
Nick's not loving it.
no. And to be fair, I have only seen it in very short increments. I saw it when I was down in California. For the 2 days I was there. I drove it to the airport, I believe. I think I drove it to the airport. It was that memorable. I don't remember. But the styling is, it's like a ugly stepchild. It's hard to love, but it's almost cute in a way.
You gotta really like it. That's the thing there with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not entirely sure that it is.
Yeah, it's a great rental.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great looking rental car. But we had one in South Carolina when I was there, and it works. I mean, it gets looks. How about that? It gets looks, for good or for bad.
The one thing I'll say for it is that because of I don't understand why it ends up being so inefficient, but it's one of the better plug-in hybrids to drive in electric mode, because it is really designed to run as an all-electric vehicle. So that would be one of the other things that I appreciate about it, is that even when you switch over to that gas engine, the driving experience is still very similar. So you're not gaining a bunch of power or losing a bunch of power as things switch over. I will tell you, coming up the mountain passes into and down through California, when that engine does need to connect, that is an unusual sound, feeling, connection experience. It not the most refined, but it's one of those things you're not going to do it very often, unless you do, in which case maybe think of something else. But for me, it would be every once in a while, and the fact that that disconnect makes the rest of the experience so so similar is one thing I would definitely give credit for.
Yeah, and that is one of those tricky things. Like, we are apparently going to see more of these range extending EVs, which is what manufacturers want to try and call them. They're plug-in hybrids of a different nature. But like Ram wants to call the Ram Charger that. The Ineos Fusilier thing is going to be a range extending serial hybrid thing. We don't know what GM's future plans are. I suspect that GM, with their hybrid move, their hybrid shift, I should say, is they're probably going to go towards parallel hybrids along the lines of the Voltec, would be my guess, but don't hold me to that yet. But serial hybrids, just by their very nature, are not as efficient as parallel hybrids. That is the core problem with something like the Outlander. And that's also why the Outlander actually has a parallel hybrid mode. It's very rare because the engine is relatively small and the stars have to align right. But like steady state highway traveling at 65 miles an hour is its most efficient sweet spot, because it can be in parallel hybrid mode. And speeds of over about 50 miles an hour to 65. That's really kind of it there. There's a reason that the upcoming Ram Charger is probably going to be one of the least efficient Rams you can get, even though it's a hybrid, just because of that lack of mechanical connection there.
Yeah.
So let's move along here. This is an interesting one. XC40 Recharge versus Model Y for reliability. Which one would you choose? That's a tricky one.
What sort of reliability are we talking about?
Yeah, Are we
talking about powertrain reliability? Are we talking about all your buttons and switches? I
would actually say this is a tricky question for both brands, because neither one of these brands is above average when you take a look at any long-term metrics.
Right. I think I think I would actually lean towards Tesla Model Y because it's a simpler machine. And if I'm thinking all of the things that can go wrong in a vehicle, reliability for most people, the first thought is getting stranded on the side of the road. But if your door lock quits working, if your window motor quits working, there are a lot more niceties. There's a lot more features that are built into that XC40. So that's one of those things. There's just that much more to go wrong. And it's if your Tesla has an issue, often a quick software reset from the driver's seat can fix a lot of those. Not to say it's not a problem or it didn't come up, but it doesn't always facilitate a stop at the dealership. So that makes things a little bit easier.
My 10,000-foot view here would be we have insufficient data to really compare. And the reason I would say that is because when we take a look at model line reliability statistics from the companies out there that provide it, XC40 Recharge is not broken out from regular XC40. It will be soon because Volvo has decided to rename them and consider them separate models, the full electric ones. So we will finally get better numbers. And the other part of this problem is that when we take a look at longer term reliability metrics by either Consumer Reports or whoever, they lump in so many things that are not true reliability into those metrics that you cannot separate Tesla's unique way of dealing with software from an actual quote unquote reliability problem. And you should never look at recalls for a measure of reliability, whether we're talking about software recalls or hardware recalls, which are actually very common with every new vehicle. This pretty much every new car is going to have a recall within the first 18 to 24 months. It just seems like it's the way things work. Because recalls can be everything from there's a page missing in your owner's manual to oops, my wheel fell off, like a Toyota BZ4X. And they can be from everybody. They can be from Toyota with a BZ4X having a wheel fall off, or it can be like my engine fell out, and everything in between. So with that in mind, these particular ones are tricky to talk about. I think if I were a betting man, I would bet on the Volvo personally, because they have a longer track record and the XC40's numbers do look generally decent. But there is that big caution that when you take a look at like the 3-year dependability studies or Consumer Reports metrics, they rank Tesla much lower than Volvo. I would assume they're actually probably pretty similar in reality once you extract some of the fluff that Tesla sometimes gets dinged for, and then just the incomplete data that we lack. For instance, Tesla chooses not to allow surveys in states that require manufacturers' permission for mining consumer records. So in most states in the US, a research company can go to the DMV and say, can you give me every registered owner of a Tesla Model Y? But in some states, they actually have to ask Tesla for permission to do that. And Tesla does not provide permission. They're the only manufacturer that doesn't. So a little bit tricky there. This is a good question. Any updates on the opening of the test network and what adapters will be allowed for CCS? We don't have any information from Tesla on this, but Ford just accidentally leaked their CCS adapter, if everybody saw that. So we know what the CCS adapter will be, and we know what it won't be. What it won't be is a J1772 to NACS adapter. So no destination chargers with the adapter that's coming with your Ford.
No level 2 cheat code.
Yeah, and this did not occur to me until we're shooting a video that's coming up for everybody on the EV Buyer's Guide channel, just prequel here. Seemingly the reason that we will not see NACS destination charger type adapters to J1772 adapters from major car companies anytime soon. GM, Ford, Stellantis, they won't comment on this at all, but it doesn't seem like one's coming down. The reason is that NACS supports 277 volt charging. J1772 never has. And if you are charging at a limited number of destination chargers in the US, they put out 277 volts because Tesla has long supported it. Varying levels of support within the Tesla family of vehicles, but they've always supported 277 volt charging in their vehicles. And because of that, you can fry some EVs that are not designed for 277 volts. Like apparently Chevy Bolt and Volt do not like it. Do not do that with your Bolt or Volt. Ford Mustang Mach-E's, use caution, because apparently there are tales of people frying their onboard chargers after having used a higher voltage destination charger. If everybody wants to know why that is, we'll deep dive down there later in this video, but there's a separate video coming out on the EV Buyer's Guide channel on that one.
And the danger is you never know which of those destination chargers are 277 until you plug in. And if I'm an adapter manufacturer, there's no way I want to gamble on somebody making sure that that's correct before they go ahead and plug in. That's a recipe for disaster.
I am personally curious to see if 277 volt charging gains wider adoption, because it makes an awful lot of sense. Like it is stupid to charge at any other voltage for a solid half of the charging stations that exist currently. Like if you're installing a new charging station at your business, your office, your warehouse, your church, your school, your high-rise apartment building, all of these various kinds of commercial, light industrial, and multi-family dwelling unit kind of locations, 277 volts just makes so much more sense. And now it is fully supported by J3400, so I suspect that there's going to be more push on that. But this also apparently seems to be why car companies are delaying the adoption of that connector, because they're going to have to redesign their onboard chargers. And there may be some software updates that maybe could mitigate this for existing vehicles. We don't know the details on that exactly, but it does appear to be some little bit of a problem there.
And right now is such a weird in-between time as, hey, we're going to switch over. Here's going to be your adapter in the meantime, which manufacturers can use J3400 and which are going to be able to access the Tesla network. And right now, there are very, very, very few options if you want to go buy a level 2 home EVSE and get a J3400 or Tesla, NACS connector on it. Same thing for level 3, your DC fast charge stations. They're, Electrify America doesn't have a system ready to go out. ChargePoint doesn't have a system that's ready to go out. So if you're buying right now, it's a weird in-between time.
Yeah. We are starting to see a few more, options, but not a lot. I was just contacted by a company that wants to try and sell slash shill us a DC fast charge station for the office. So we'd have to pay half of it, and they'll cough up the other half. But I told them I wasn't interested in a CHAdeMO CCS charging station, even though we currely have something that could CHAdeMO charge. So I think I might hang on till we see.
And I have
a lower output.
I have CHAdeMO charged that thing, and
you did, and you got an error.
I had a CHAdeMO error, and then I did get it running, and it ended up down at like 11 kilowatts, which for people who don't know is high-end level 2 home charging.
Yeah, but that's wicked fast for an Outlander.
It is, and it's wicked fast for most plug-in hybrids because they tend to have lower speed onboard level 2 chargers. But CHAdeMO is maybe not the way to go.
So here's an opinion poll. Let's start with Nick here, the youngster in the crowd here. So what's your opinion on the side view cameras? Where manufacturers are trying to replace the side view mirrors with the side cameras. Are you team camera or team mirror?
Oh, man, without having firsthand experience with the side view camera, I can't say that one or the other is better. I do, however, like my mirrors, and that drives me crazy.
Getting weird reflections here, apparently. So here we go. TV out of the way magically. So sorry.
I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I don't have a good enough idea to have an opinion. So I'm not going to give one right now. But I do, however, use my mirrors quite often, and I like having them there. And I don't know how reliable the side view cameras are, if there's been any problems, so on and so forth. So until I have some firsthand experience, I'm going to hold off on my opinion. I'll definitely see what Travis has to say on this, because you might have some more experience than me.
At least a little bit. So, I've been in quite a few vehicles now that have a side view camera built in. My daily vehicle is a Tesla Model 3.
This would be the ones that replace the side view mirrors.
Yes, understood. So, but I have been in cars that have cameras designed to show you off to the side, mostly when you're turning. It's not something you can pull up at a moment's notice. I prefer it in a lane change situation because you're generally looking at one spot. You want to stay as forward facing as possible, and just a little bit less turn shows you a little bit more. Now, the other thing is it depends on how big the screen is that you're looking at, where this camera is projecting onto, because if you have a small screen, you are losing visual real estate, which is a safety concern. Right now, I definitely like the option. I like a mirror and a camera, but I also would probably down the road be okay with taking a mirror off, having that camera in place. I understand there are some pros and cons. There's always a point of failure option where all of a sudden that camera disconnects. That's probably going to be a very irregular circumstance, especially here in the US. The reason we don't have them is they're not legal yet.
Yes.
And part of that's going to be safety concerns. So there's has to be a redundancy built in, that sort of thing. I'd be fine just having a camera, but you just have to make sure that the screen you're looking at is in the right place, is big enough to see. You can still maybe adjust it, but it does take time to adjust your eyes from a live, reflected image
that's the
to
key thing.
a screen.
Yeah. I like being able to move. I know you're probably not. This isn't how they teach drivers that, I'm sure, but I like to be able to kind of move my head and kind of just get a wider view. And I know in my massive GMC Savannah work van, the mirrors are about, you can't see the scale, but they're huge, but you can barely see anything out of them. So I'm constantly moving my head, moving around to try to get a better field of view. And I just don't know if that wasn't there and it was a camera. Obviously, probably work vans are the last vehicle to get such thing. But if they were to, it definitely would take some getting used to. I just don't know how I would adapt to it. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see if that takes off.
Alex, I do have another opinion question. I noticed it at the very beginning of our stream, and I'm curious. This one looks like it came from the straight pipes, and the question is Plymouth Prowler or Chevy SSR?
Prowler.
I saw it, and I know my answer, but I want to know what you guys think.
Always Prowler. The answer is always Prowler. Why go for the imitation? Go for the original. And it's got to be Prowler purple with a trailer. Yeah,
it's a great combo, no doubt.
None of that silly straight pipes yellow Prowler bullshit going on. It's got to be purple. Got to be Prowler. It's got to be a Plymouth Prowler, not a Chrysler Prowler, because tradition.
Yeah, I've only seen one one time, and it was magnificent.
Fun fact: I almost bought one, and my dad talked me out of it in 1999, before you were both born. And I wanted it so bad, but I couldn't afford it and the trailer. And logically, you need the trailer because it doesn't have a trunk. I got talked out of it. It was probably the worst decision to get talked out of. I should have bought it, but yeah.
What year did you say?
Fun. 1999.
I was one.
You were okay. Oh,
yeah.
We were both on this earth, Alex.
Okay.
Yeah, so get it correct.
I'm going to go the other direction.
Moving
I will
on
say
to
Chevy
Mazdaland.
SSR.
Moving on to Mazdaland. Are you surprised and or disappointed that CX-70 is literally a CX-90 with a different plastic bumper, because the metal's still the same, different plastic bumper and no third row? They're even exactly the same price.
Nick, you want to start off?
I'm going to be honest. I don't have enough experience with this vehicle. I haven't had hands-on. I haven't done much research on it. So I'm going to bow out of this one. I don't have an opinion. Travis, on to you.
Yeah, I'm super disappointed. If you're getting rid of the third row, you're essentially saying this is not designed for practicality or all the functionality that, say, the CX-90 is capable of. Okay, great. If you're getting rid of some of the top end functionality, what are you bringing instead? And the answer is nothing.
More space.
Not even like
tiny bit more cargo room.
By a hair, right? Inches on like the load floor, because there's no seats there.
It's going to be like 5 inches vertically and the size of the missing third row.
Right. So assuming you stack things on a regular basis, you want that CX-70. That's our official tip. No, I'm disappointed. Make it more interesting. Make it more of think of like the empty nester vehicle. Make it more style forward. I understand having a lot of the same components, but
we don't know whether it drives differently. they could redeem themselves by making it sportier tuned. Like the suspension could be firmer, but we don't know because we haven't driven it yet.
Could, but you could have also added a different sort of suspension option. You could have a more adjustable suspension because, again, you kind of lead into the premium because you're not trying to get the uber practical buyer. So yeah, I'm disappointed. I want to drive it, but yeah, that one's a little bit disappointing because I'd get the CX-90 because give me the third row.
I'm a little torn because I don't mind third row deletes. What bugs me is that we all had this hope that what we would be getting is not what we got. I think if they had just come out and went like, hey, you know what? We're going to give you a 2-row CX-90. We've all been like, yeah, whatever. But so many people had looked at what was happening in Europe with CX-60 and CX-80, and people were like, ooh, look at that. We're going to get this true midsize thing. It's going to be like sporty Ford Edge, something like that. And to be honest, if Ford said the Edge is coming back and it's an Explorer with the missing third row, I think I'd be like, that's fine. Sure, why not? But if they built it up and said, don't worry, there's going to be a new Ford Edge, it's going to be rear-wheel drive, it's going to be fantastic, and it's going to compete in the midsize segment, blah, 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 and then it was just a 2-row Explorer, that's a trickier one. I will say it's not unique. Durango offers a third row delete, and on the big end of things, Expedition, strangely enough, has a third row delete. So you can get a 2-row Expedition.
But they don't call it a different model.
That's true. That's true.
Third row delete.
But maybe the different model part is actually a benefit. And this occurred to me when I was reminded that we ended up renting a 2-row Durango in Hawaii once. And there was a group of us, and I thought, don't worry, we rented a Durango. It'll be fine. So 6 of us roll out there to hop in the car, tilt slide the second row seats back, and it's like, there's no third row. And you're like, lift up the thing, you're like, oh, there's just a big cargo hold here. I guess we will have to take 2 cars. So someone had to, hop in a taxi because didn't actually have 6 seats.
Because all those Durango owners get confused and don't bother checking the seating capacity because they go, oh, it's a Durango.
Had it been the Durango Sport, and we all knew the Durango Sport was a 2-row, I would have been like, hey, that's not the one I want to rent. Let's Hertz something else. EV charger installation here. What charger would we suggest for 2024, 2025? I don't know about you, but I would honestly say that anything that has an NACS connector or a CCS or a J1772 connector is just fine. I would target, at this point in time, to be honest, I would probably go J1772, only because if you have the money and you are doing a new install and you're pulling cable, there are currently 80 amp J1772 chargers for 19 kilowatt charging at home. And currently, the Tesla chargers that are sold right now, as I recall, they're all going to top out at 48 amps because they deleted the 80 amp charger for the moment in their lineup. It's probably going to come back at some point, but at the moment, it doesn't exist. The reality is we're going to have adapters from now till Kingdom Come between NACS and J1772. So, it doesn't really matter which order the adapter's in, and you can just leave it on the connector for the rest of its life. It doesn't really cause any functional problems.
Yeah, so to that point, I have the Tesla wall connector. I have the universal wall connector. Just forward thinking, it was really at the time the only way to get a built-in adapter without having, if we have this unit and we want to keep it, make sure I'm on screen here, make the unit cohesive and not have a dangling cord because it's got an adapter on it all the time or an extra shelf that things have to go on and off. It's a nice system. I haven't gotten installed. We've just scheduled the appointment, and we'll have a video on what that looks like over on EV Buyer's Guide. But it's the option I went with because it makes the most sense in the moment. And I don't have a need for a 19 kilowatt charger. And most people don't. And at the moment, most of the EVs on the road don't have that charging capability. And most people who are buying EVs over the next 10 years are also going to be looking at used EVs. So they'll be in that same boat.
I will say that I do like I think you were spot on with your choice there. Because if you don't need higher level 2 charging, I would say the Tesla is not only a decent price, but I do like that dual functionality. So I think that would be a solid way to go. Other than that, outside of those options, if you're simply on a budget, get the cheapest level 2 charger you can get, because honestly, there's not a lot of difference outside that.
Unless it's one that plugs into a wall outlet, that is
Yeah.
not the way to go.
I'm okay with that, because all of our level 2s at the office have a 50 or a 60 amp plug. I think that's fine. I don't mind that part.
Plugging into a 1450.
Yeah, there are a 1460. So we two of them plug into a 1450. One's a 1460. I don't think it's a huge deal, mind you. Cost could be lower. Like if you really were cost conscious, you could get yourself like a $200 48 amp EVSE. That's not going to be a problem at all. It's going to be super cheap.
Yeah.
I will say that the future of 19 kilowatt charging looks bright. So GM is fully on board with the 19 kilowatt thing. And you will seemingly shortly be able to buy more averagey sized vehicles with 19 kilowatt charging if you really want to, get your midsize crossover full fast. Moving on to Drew's question here. Thanks for the super chat, by the way, Drew. Honda Prologue has GM's chimes and switches, or window switches, car chimes, etc., really costly to engineer. The chimes generally no, but you would be surprised how expensive like things like switches really are. Even making them a different color can be pricey. This is a question into the weeds that I get asked frequently, but on the business side of things, it's important to remember that having a different switch doesn't just mean the cost of that actual part. It's the cost of engineering the part for this single-use vehicle. There aren't going to be very many Honda models that are crossed with GM. And it's also the fact that Honda's going to then have to warranty those parts and inventory those parts for warranty for quite some time as well. So anytime you make something unique, it just means that it's that much more difficult to actually, handle the inventory, et cetera, on that. By making them the same as every other GM car, it doesn't matter whether the switch breaks now or in 5 years or 10 years. It's actually a benefit to you as a consumer that they are the same as the GM parts, because they're just going to be easier and cheaper to replace. I don't know if you checked out the comment section on the Honda Prologue video, but we got some hate from Honda EV fans that are very anti-GM, that are like, well, we liked the so-and-so's review because they were brutal and they were really mean to the Prologue, and we think everybody should just shit on this car. And I don't know about your final thoughts. We'll ask. I get to you in a bit there, and then finally see what Nick thinks here. But to me, I don't know if it matters, because I think it looks like a Honda. Honestly, does not drive that differently than I thought a Honda EV would drive, because there's not a world of difference between Honda SUVs and GM SUVs driving. There's just not. And there are definite advantages for them doing it this way. They get the tax credit. It came to market right away. When you look at Toyota's half-hearted attempt on BZ4X, the Honda's just better in every way. So, tax credit, longer range, greater efficiency, everything about it is better than the Busy Forks. And yes, it's a GM product. I don't mind saying that. We addressed that right up front in the video. But I don't think that's intrinsically a problem. I don't think a Honda owner is going to get out of a Passport and get into that and not like it. I think they're going to get out of a Passport, get into that, and go, Honda made an EV.
Yeah, I understand why some people have feelings about it, right? GM and Honda are two fairly different brands. They have different focuses. They have different customer bases in lots of ways. But do you want a Honda electric car this year? Because if you did, this is the only way that's going to happen. A little bit of a preview over on EV Buyer's Guide. I was also there at the Prologue event, and we shot a video talking about where Honda has gone with their electrification in the past and where they're going in the future. And one of the things I touch on is that if Honda had to rush an EV, you're going to get a bad product. And so they get to keep their name in the conversation. They've taken all the guts, right, of that General Motors vehicle and then said, let's Hondafy it. And I think they've done a great job. And I haven't driven the Blazer, but I did spend some time with it at a number of the recent auto shows. And I'll tell you what, even though the Prologue is a little less practical as far as like the space, I wasn't able to fit I didn't fit quite as well in the back of the Prologue as the Blazer. The room seemed a little bit different. But it's an infinitely more attractive vehicle to me, and it's one that's going to age really well because it's got those subtle features instead of something big and striking and bold.
Yeah, I think it looks
teal
way better.
color.
Yeah.
North Shore Pearl has my heart, but honestly, if you don't like it, then don't buy it. Honda is coming out with another electric vehicle. This is not the future of Honda Electric. This is a stepping stone. They have done it before. There have been some Isuzus rebadges Hondas, which
this isn't their first
at
rodeo.
some point is another exactly. And I had a passport, so and it's not their first rodeo with GM either, right? Because Isuzu ended up being under the GM banner.
Isuzu.
So.
Sorry, 2 on the nose there. The Isuzu rodeo. Yeah, not the first rodeo.
Oh, I know. So it's one of those things where
Nick,
if you don't like it, don't buy it. But
yeah. So Nick, what do you think? Do you Prologue or Blazer? Which one's better looking?
The Prologue.
Yeah, I think it's universal. I think everybody, that's why I'm personally intrigued. Like if I had infinite cash to spend on long-term vehicles, not enough people are liking and subscribing and hitting that super chat button. Shame on you
your
all.
friends, folks.
We would buy a Prologue because I think it is the best looking GM Ultium family vehicle that they have created so far, and I'm just super intrigued to see how this goes. I asked Honda very directly, Honda's engineers at the launch of the Prologue, like, what do you think of this and the potential for reliability issues? They only would say they feel confident in putting a Honda logo on it. So
such a political answer.
Make of that what you will.
Plus Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. If you have something against the Blazer, go buy a Prologue instead.
Yes. And that is an entire reason to Prologue instead of Blazer, to be perfectly honest.
Hey,
here's
Alex,
an interesting question about... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
Hey, real quick. Did you happen to see the Prologue commercial on Super Bowl?
I did not.
They said Prologue. Now, at the Honda event, did they say Prologue or did they say Prologue?
They said Prologue.
Maybe it was the way.
Prologue.
Maybe the way the guy, because I heard it and I like perked up and I'm like, wait, that's Prologue. But
maybe that's
maybe
the
guy.
Maybe
the guy said it in a weird way. But okay, good to know it's Prologue. Because I thought I was going crazy.
I'm going to go with Prologue if you get the accessory Jeep grille, which has 7 slots.
Prologue
no matter how many times Honda tried to claim it was 8, it's definitely 7. At any rate, moving along to the Cybertruck rusting, we actually have some Facebook posts on that. I've thought about making a video, but I really want to find someone's Cybertruck. So if you are in the Bay Area and you are willing to, roll your Cybertruck by, let's take a peek at it. I happen to co-own a materials engineering company, so we have the equipment to actually look at this thing. I will say that stainless steel rusts. So, the important thing to remember is that no alloy is perfectly blended. Imagine making an alloy like stainless steel or brass or any other alloy that we routinely deal with, whether it's, like this arm for the TV that's behind me, etc. Alloy blending is never going to be perfect. It's like making a milkshake or cake batter. It's always going to be lumpy by the end. The key question is, how lumpy is it? What are the lumps made of, etc. So there are always going to be areas in stainless steel where there is free iron available to rust somewhere. And if there's not enough chromium to passivate it, and there's not a chromium oxide layer on top to keep oxygen from getting to those iron components, you're going to get little dots of rust. That's why when you put your stainless steel cutlery in the dishwasher, it rusts, because that's an accelerated corrosive environment for that kind of metal. So, whether or not it's rail dust, as many people have been assuming, or not, we don't know exactly. My guess would be that there may be some surface contamination, but the few people that have written in specifically about this to me have said that even after cleaning and it going away, it comes back later. And that would lead me to think that it is not rail dust, because otherwise the spot would not appear in the same place. It's actually just some little tiny area in the stainless steel that is actually corroding. And that's just the way that is. So,
and obviously Nick and I knew all of that, but we wanted to let Alex go through it.
Right. Yeah. What Alex said.
Yeah. What he said there. So
you said it just how I would.
Yeah. So moving along here, let's see here. So I'm not sure where this one came from, but the answer here is that when we're talking about new cars, the honest answer is the wealthy buy new cars. So moving along here, actually, this is not true. I have been trying to get my hands on a Mirage for a long time, Naveen. I have begged and I have pleaded. I may be the only one to do so, but I've begged and pleaded Mitsubishi to try and find us one. I tried to get a dealer to lend us one, and for some reason, the Mitsubishi dealers just would not, for reasons that I do not understand. Same thing with the Versa. I haven't been able to get my hands on one. Supposedly one's coming soon, but God knows where it is, which is why I have proposed buying a manual transmission Versa. Because I think that, and I've talked about this before, that I don't think there are enough inexpensive vehicles in the US right now. The reality is, when you look at the demographics of a new car buyer, and I've said this over and over and over again, especially when it comes to EVs, the new car buyer is not, 20 something college graduate that wants to go buy their first car. They're 50 to 60 years old at the peak of the bell curve, highly educated, single family home owning, big income earning, etc. Why do you think there's so many $90,000 pickup trucks out there? Because that's who's buying pickup trucks. It's not, the average worker person. That's just not who's doing it. And I think that's a shame personally. I think that there should be more affordable cars. And I'm actually on board with allowing Chinese imports to make cars more affordable for people. The peak sales for new cars in America was like 16 million cars a year, but that was decades ago practically at this point. And that means ever constricting used car values. For people that want to buy a used car, I know lots of people that are like, I will never buy a new car. I'm only ever going to buy used. Great for you. However, there's a problem. Someone had to buy that car new for you to buy it used. And if all the new cars are expensive to maintain luxury cars that are high performance and have all the bells and whistles, etc., guess what? You're going to be stuck with a bunch of unreliable, expensive to maintain used cars 5-10 years down the road. So I think that's a big problem in the new car market right now. But it's also a self-fulfilling prophecy because, the wealthy are driving this. They're the ones that buy the new cars. They're the ones that are buying cars that are more profitable. So if you can only make 100,000 cars in this factory, why would you make a cheap car? Because you can make more money selling the same number of more expensive cars or fewer more expensive cars. And that's, I think, really the problem. So off my soapbox, discuss.
I mean, just to add, we did a value car of the year because it is something that we care about, is that there's a car that the everyman can afford. And if you are the everyman who is just able to get or consider a new vehicle, where's the best place to put your dollars? And when we talk about, we were just down at Ram at the $90,000 plus, I think just under 100, but tungsten trim of the Ram 1500. But it doesn't mean that there can't be a more affordable version of that same Ram pickup. It's a wide range, absolutely. If there was just a little bit, if there's a little more value on the low end, and then when a manufacturer makes an affordable vehicle, people have to buy it because you vote with your dollars. And if you don't go buy the inexpensive new vehicle, they're going to quit making it.
Yep.
Even if it's less profitable, if there's still money in it, if there's a market, when you buy a used car, let's say Ram, just because we're there. If you buy a used Ram makes $0.
Exactly.
So if the low cost, if the low margin base model is still margin for them and enough of them are sold, they'll put more effort into the base model. So it's not hey, it's your fault, but it's just understanding it's a unique dynamic.
Yep. I hate to say this way, but it's the best way to say it. New cars are not designed for used car buyers. Mind-blowing thing, right? So when people say, why does a car maker design it this way? It's going to be unreliable in 10 years. That first owner is not going to own that car in 10 years. It does not matter at all, not to the new car buyer, and as a result, not to the maker of that car. Even companies like Toyota that definitely prefer building in dependability and reliability into their vehicles, they are laser focused on the first owner of that vehicle. Toyota does not do anything for next generation owners. They're not designing anybody for used cars down the road. They may give some lip surface to this or that, but they're designing for their vehicles for their customers. Their customers want dependability and reliability. They tend to own their cars longer on average than some of the other brands. So like Lexus skews very high for the luxury segment in purchases, not leases. So other luxury manufacturers, notably the Europeans, 80 to 90% of their more expensive models are leased. Like well over half of every new BMW, Audi, Mercedes, etc., is leased. Even Lexus is over 50% lease. But Lexus does skew towards more people that want to buy. Even so, they're not going to keep their car more than 5 to 7 years. And so the reality is long-term dependability and reliability is less important than keeping that customer happy and building your car to what that customer wants in that ownership window, which, is unfortunate, but that's just the way the world works.
And just to add one little nugget is that the manufacturers have now figured out how to make money on used vehicles, and that is with subscription services.
Yep.
And so even when you go buy that used Chevy from the dealer down the street who just sells a bunch of used cars, if you want some of those connected services, you're going to end up paying Chevrolet. So that's how they've figured out how to get some money from the used car market.
Yep. Interesting question on the 3-door mini EV. I am not actually sure when we will see that in the US. I would expect it to come eventually, although I have not heard whether they're actually bringing it to the US. Have you, Travis?
No, and my guess is no, because my question for the group and for everyone watching: how many 3-door vehicles are currently sold in the United States?
Oh, I mean, none, but
so then why would we bring the lower mileage mini EV with less doors? Because Americans buy more doors than they need often. I don't see it happening. I'd love to. I would love
because
to.
they need the EV credits is the answer. That's why the 500E is coming back.
Mm-hmm. But is there not there's a 4-door option, right?
Not for the 500E.
No. I mean for the mini. So
the mini. Well, this is the next generation mini EV, which I believe the Mini Cooper EV will be 3-door only. There will be other EV minis, but the Cooper EV is going to be 3-door only. Someone can correct us if we have misspoken there. But I believe that that's probably going to come soon. When, though, we don't know.
I'd love to see it. I would be someone who would absolutely consider it, but
Yep.
We'll see.
So let's see here. Moving along here. Nope. Nobody's going to the Santa Clara Convention Center. Nope. Nobody's doing that one. I saw someone about the Rivian R2. Here we go. We did not get invited to the unveiling of the R2. I have not heard anybody that's actually been invited from the media yet. I'm assuming that some invites have gone out. Don't know. We are hunting around for how we can get more information on that. So, oops, we missed someone's super chat here. I apologize for that. I will have to go hunt back for that. Oh, buy a Honda Prologue.
Get you, Anton. Don't worry.
There we go. You know what? If more people gave the $2, thank you for the super chat. Now we just need 20,000 more of those.
Couple more. Yeah.
Couple more.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Here's an interesting one. Toyota Venza or RAV4. Speaking of styling, I like the Venza styling, but it's not nearly as practical as the RAV4. So I would get a RAV4, but I like the Venza's look.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I'm even the more pragmatic side of things, and I'd go get a Venza. If I needed some more room, I'd throw a rooftop box on there and call it good. It's a good looking machine. Yeah. It's a much nicer experience.
Yeah, I like the interior more, although it never, as I recall, it has not received the new infotainment system, right?
I'm not sure.
I could be wrong on that one, because Venza's being discontinued. But because it's being discontinued, you're probably going to get a great deal on it. I know actually 2 years ago, we had a next door neighbor that only it was more than 2 years ago, 3 years ago now. Well, Venza was still relatively young in the US market. She leased a Venza for less than a RAV4 hybrid because Venza's not going anywhere quickly. Nobody seems to want them for some reason. And then, of course, you can
But
always
its
wait for the new
replacement is going to
Crown.
be hot.
Yeah, the replacement
Yeah.
looks interesting. I don't know whether it will be hot because I'm not clear how many people really want a wagon. That is a different
Wagon-ish.
question. I did see one comment in here that I have totally missed here, which was about the resale value on EVs. The interesting question that I have on the resale value on EVs is, as far as I have seen so far, not only do we have, of course, the massive deflation in the Tesla line of things, we also have the reality that the $7,500 tax credit effectively devalues resale value calculations. So when people look at the resale value calculations that are out there from ALG, et cetera, and it's like, X 20% loss, 30% loss in 3 years. Remember that if that tax credit is factored in, just like on the hood discounts, that your resale value will be lower. But what is the true resale value? That's more difficult to divine. It has been, bad with Teslas lately because they cut the price so much on new ones that has really caused a problem. Other EVs, it has been less of a problem, but anytime you see price cuts on an identical model, you're going to see that value drop. I'm expecting, although it's too early to tell, I'm expecting that we will also see residuals drop notably on Grand Cherokee over the next few years, because Jeep has cut the price tag drastically on Grand Cherokee for 2024. So we'll probably see that same sort of thing ripple through.
And I think because Tesla has been the leader in EVs and the headline champion for the last decade, not only has Tesla lowered prices, which is better for the consumer, except for the one who just bought it, but honestly, their price fluctuation and the continuing reduction in price is not so different than cash on the hood that you get with a lot of manufacturers. It's just a lot more public. And that's it's always felt like a weird thing for me when you drive by a dealership and it says President's Day sale. How do you have a sale on an item that doesn't have a determined value?
Right.
So when Tesla says, here's the price, and there's no negotiating, when they lower that price, it's essentially just means it's on sale. And that's kind of how things happen, but it's so much more in the public. It dropped $5,000. That's great for everyone who wants to buy it, but your resale just dropped by $5,000 plus that $7,500, and that's going to cut into an enormous percentage. So that, and as people get more comfortable with them and they sit on dealer lots less, I wouldn't worry about long-term EV depreciation, but it's certainly in a weird spot at the moment.
Yeah. I will say that so far, outside of Tesla, long-term EV depreciation is relatively rapid, but keeping that tax credit in mind is critical. The one thing that I don't know is comparative metrics. We'll see this soon over the next few years on EVs that did and did not get that federal tax credit and how that affects their future resale value. But it's going to be about 3 years before we know. And this is a good time to talk about resale value, because a lot of people get this confused, and somewhere between confused and just flat wrong. When car companies talk about resale value and you hear, ALG gives residual value of the year award, or Edmunds, says, the resale value of this is better than that, et cetera, et cetera. Remember that they're talking average MSRP versus what the sales will be after X period of time, 3 years or 5 years. If your car transacts at or above MSRP, it's much easier to get in at a decent number. If your car always has $5,000 to $10,000 on the hood, then you actually may have a true resale value that is substantially similar, but it's not going to look as good on paper. And I've done this analysis for several years on, for instance, Nissan Rogue and RAV4. The conventional wisdom is Nissan Rogue has poor resale value. When you actually look at the data going back over the last decade, RAV4 and Rogue are very, very similar, whether we're talking about 3-year, 5-year, or even 10-year residual value. The deal is the Rogue started cheaper. So if you buy a RAV4 for for $40,000 and you sold it after 5 years for $20,000, you lost 50% of your value. If you're Rogue, you bought it for, or was MSRP'd for $40,000. You actually paid $30,000 for it. You sold it later for $15,000. It's going to look like your resale value is terrible. The actual percentage is identical. That's the problem with cash on the hood where it comes to play here. So, and that is the large difference in resale value calculations, say between Tundra and a Ram or a Chevy or a Ford, is you can get thousands and thousands of dollars off on every half-ton American truck, and you're not going to get that on the Tundra. But when you go to sell it after 10 years, they're not a world apart in terms of their actual resale value. Here's another super chat. Thanks, Daryl. Why do you think Ford is struggling so much with quality control with companies like Hyundai, Kia, and certain brands General Motors to seem to figure out? This is an interesting question that I don't know if I have an exact answer to. Because Ford can hit it right with some models, and then some launches just go seemingly all kinds of wrong. I would say Ford is the least predictable when it comes to a new car launch. I don't know if you guys agree there or not. Like, there's some car companies where you're like, that is going to be a hot mess. Or you look at that and you're like, that's going to go pretty well. You know, like new Camry comes out, I'm sure it's going to be fine. New Camry's not that much different than the old Camry. It's Toyota. They can have a misstep. I would bet on them being fine. New something comes out from Jeep and you're like, I might want to wait a year, see how that goes. If I was really worried about reliability. Ford, you never know.
Well, Nick, you mentioned some of the EcoBoost Power Boost, right?
Yeah, EcoBoost. Yeah. No, that's I guess reliability and quality control go hand in hand. Even when the Maverick came out, I remember someone I knew had bought a Maverick like right when it came out, and it came in the speaker grill on the dash had a big old wave in it, and that was, you know what, in Ford's defense, they're making sure that the quality control is on each Ford Maverick, because every one I looked at from there on out had this little
everyone
bubble.
Looks like a Pringle.
Yeah, but obviously that's not what they intended, but they're consistent, so it's like it's like bad, but they're doing a good job at being bad. So yeah, I think maybe it's production numbers, maybe it's them rushing it to the market. I'm not sure why they can't get it seemingly right. I have a friend of mine that had an F-150 with a ton of problems. Then he bought another one that had no problems. So it's just it's hit or miss with Ford. And I couldn't tell you why.
I really liked the interior of the Mach-E, and I am occasionally surprised that Ford will create, a product that like the Mach-E, where I think the interior could have easily been sold as a Lincoln. I think it would have somehow made more sense in a way. And then you get, a Lincoln Navigator that the interior is not as nice as the Mach-E in some areas. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think it's a lineup confusion.
Yeah,
just not knowing where to place things.
I will say that
Ford, where's the Lincoln Mach-E?
Yeah,
I'd love to see what you could put together.
That's what I've always wondered. I will say that Ford seems to at least have internally addressed this, or recognized that this is a problem. So, a bunch of people that I've talked to at Ford, and even in Ford PR statements that they've come out with have said, hey, we know this is a problem. It's something that we're working on. Some products had been delayed here and there, and altered and streamlined. I will say that one key difference when it comes to quality and reliability, and some of these perceptions around it, tends to be the American car companies have lots of options. Let's put it this way. So, you buy an F-150. I mean, configuring your F-150 on the online configurator can take an hour because there are so many different options. And Ford is trying to streamline that with that new Explorer Travis and I looked at, where they're like, we cut this many trims and this many models and we're streamlining the thing. But there are still so many different ways compared to the Pilot, where you're like, you pick a color and you get 3 trims and all-wheel drive or not, and that is it. Like they don't even want to make a model with captain's chairs. Like they're just like, no, you can remove that middle seat yourself.
Yeah.
So the more options you have, the more planning you have to do, the more engineering has to be done for these options, and the more failure points and quality control points you can have. So we do see Ford recognizing that and really trying to streamline this process. But there are two sides to that, and the flip side to that would be if you like that level of variation and you want that unique trim, that's a rare option or whatever, you're just not going to find it in the Pilot. Like, good luck getting a Pilot with a full LCD instrument cluster or, feature X, Y, and Z, because it just doesn't fit into this trim structure.
Yeah.
It's a good point. That is a main reason why. And you think about how much tooling it takes to make all those different options, and there's a lot of moving parts on the assembly line.
Yeah, and General Motors, I think, and Ford are probably the biggest. Offender is not the right word, but they're definitely the biggest. Actually, no, Stellantis here too. But like the three of them together, especially in their half-ton trucks, GM doesn't just change the dashboard, upper dashboard color in like the top end Denali trims of the Sierra. They change the color of all the buttons in the dash as well. So you get a brown interior, you get brown buttons. And that's not a variation we would see in a Toyota or a Subaru or a Nissan, or honestly, even a BMW. You get a brown interior in a BMW, you still have black switches and buttons. So that level of interesting attention to detail in one segment can cause more problems on the other side. Because sure, you changed the color. Was it the right color? Does the color match? Is this brown the same as that brown? Because they're different suppliers and all that coordination. It just tends to be, more problematic, I would say.
Yeah.
Here's a good question for both of you, because I think we all have the same answer here. Since compact trucks are getting larger, do you think we'll see more competition for mini trucks like the Maverick?
I hope so.
I do too.
So. Yeah, I really like that approach. I hope more. I mean, a little Nissan hardbody would be sweet. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I'd like some more competition for the Maverick. Travis, what do you think?
Sign me up. The weird spot for the Maverick is sort of what we saw with like the Honda Ridgeline, which is is it a truck? And what we've seen in the at the Hyundai Santa Cruz, which is it a truck? And it's like, well, they have truck beds. The question is, what are you trying to do with them? What can they do? I think the compact truck is dead, and I hate to say that, but I don't see it making a resurgence. But at some point, are we? Yeah. But at some point, it would be great to see things stop getting bigger. I have a '94 Chevy 2500 pickup, and it's essentially the exact same dimensions as a brand new Colorado. And trust me, safety comes into a play. There's a lot less safety structure built into my truck, but I'm not lacking in space. So I'd love to see more options there, or even just for people who want to tow. That's one of the reasons to get a truck. If we had some more SUVs that leaned a little bit more into towing capacity, then those would be viable options for a lot of folks. But love the Maverick for what it is. I saw a report that says that General Motors may have been working on something, but as they transition towards, having to switch towards plug-in hybrids, that's the other piece, is that we're not going to see a small truck without really high fuel economy, which means it's not going to have a lot of power, which means no one's going to buy it in the truck market. So it has to be electric. Maybe Rivian, the R2T will be a little bit smaller than.
That's the one thing I'll say.
It's Colorado,
Right. If we got a plug-in hybrid truck or an electric truck, it could actually be small. Unfortunately, without legislative changes in the United States, we're never going to see a truly small truck, because this is what I mind blown here. When I first saw some of the people reviews out there for Maverick, I saw headlines, kid you not, the first truly compact truck in decades in America. And I was like, whoa, back that train up, buddy. like the Maverick is the size of a Dodge Durango. So if a Dodge Durango is a compact thing to you, then hey, sure, you do you. But it is way bigger than you are thinking. Like a Maverick is not small, but there's a reason it's not small. It can't be small in the US. So the way that corporate average fuel economy standards in the US work, and this dates back decades and decades. So back in the fuel embargo era, the US decided that we should have better, or oil embargo era, the US decided we should have requirements for fuel efficiency in vehicles. And people want to say this is a liberal problem. George W. Bush was the last one to tinker in any real way with the way CAFE worked in the United States. Well-known liberal George W. Bush. And so the problem with the way CAFE works is that it's based on a vehicle's footprint. So in the truck segment, when your vehicle gets bigger, the footprint, which is the track width and the wheelbase, when it gets bigger, your fuel economy gets to go down. But when your footprint gets smaller, it has to go up. And when you look at the way these charts intersect, if you got back to classic Toyota pickup truck size from the 1980s, if you got that small, the pickup truck would have to get 50 miles per gallon. And there's just no way to do that. The Maverick is already, needing to sell in big hybrid volumes. That's why the hybrid drivetrain is there. It has to sell a decent number of hybrids in order to make that math work. If you were to get a truly small truck in America, those numbers would be unachievable for the price tag that they would be able to charge, because people think small, they want cheap, and cheap and small won't intersect with those fuel economy requirements. And unless we see some legislative changes, which seem very unlikely from either party, it's just not going to work. But this is also why we don't have big sedans in America, because the inverse is true in the sedan market. When the sedan gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the fuel economy gimme for its size, the allowance for it being less efficient, just falls off a cliff. So this is why 1990s sedans were much bigger than current sedans. So we see a shrinking of sedans and a growing of trucks and SUVs because of the way this legislation was created. And it was honestly an unintended consequence. Nathan's asking about the chicken tax here. Chicken tax only would affect imported vehicles of this type. The reason we can't have them at all in the United States, not just not importing them, the reason they won't build them here either, is because of the average fuel economy requirements. The way out of it would be if you plug-in hybridized it, even if it was a tiny plug-in hybrid, like 15 miles of range, which would be stupid, that could probably get through the requirements, but that's the cheap problem. So then you're not a cheap small truck anymore. Then you're just a small truck. But that
and the first one we see, that's the Ram Charger, and that's hardly compact.
Right. But that's probably the way out of there. Is the corporate average fuel economy standard. The plug-in hybrid would be the way out of the corporate average fuel economy standard. Because the chicken tax is one thing that we should talk about since someone asked about it. Back in post-World War II, American chickens were very cheap. America was throwing chickens, literally frozen chickens, at Europe, and everybody in Europe was complaining that American chickens were being dumped on them because they were just so cheap. Hey, they were delicious too. Everybody loves chicken. They responded with some retaliatory tariffs on the United States on a whole bunch of things. The trade war broke out, was resolved in the end, but somehow in this trade war, the American tax on imported trucks was retained. So that was the vestige of this chicken war, was the tax on imported trucks. That's why it's called the chicken tax, even though currently it has nothing to do with chicken. What it means is if you are selling a cargo-focused vehicle with a cargo bed or a van type vehicle that's cargo-focused and has a front row only, it's taxed at 25%. It's a big, big tax, which is why Sprinter is being built in the United States, which is why various car companies have had various ways of trying to get around it until the US government says, no, that doesn't work. Like the Subaru Brat with the stupid backwards facing seats, chicken tax. The Transit Connect passenger version, that existed because of the chicken tax. And if you got a cargo one, they shipped it to America with seats. They took the seats out. They shipped the seats back to Europe, stuck the seats in some new vehicles, sent them back to the US. Other car companies have tried knockdown kits where they assemble it, disassemble it, bring it to the US and reassemble it, all to avoid that tax. But intrinsically, the tax is not the problem. You could build your tiny truck in Mexico. It would be really cheap. And, who knows? We may see some Chinese companies trying to build pickup trucks in Mexico, because then they wouldn't be taxed that same way because it's in North America. We'll see how that goes over time. But speaking of time, we are now running out. So any final words from you guys both?
Very informative. I learn a lot when I talk to you, Alex. Learn
Lots of
something new
chickens.
every day. Lots of chickens.
Now, we've some of the stuff we covered today. We do have videos coming up. Like you said, we've got a charging video. We've got some of the Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid updates, as well as I saw a few questions about the Tesla Model 3 Highland. I had a chance to drive that this week, so I have something coming up for that as well. But thanks everyone for joining us, and if you missed a piece, feel free to check it out on the podcast as well.
Yep, and we will get to your question the next time we do a live show. So everybody stay tuned for that. I can't promise one next Friday, but next Friday is possible. So stay tuned for that. And let us know in the comment section, the permanent comment section for this video, what time of day and what day of the week seems to be best. Because, 5 p.m. on a Friday is kind of tricky for us, but if it's good for you, who knows? We may reassemble then. And until that time, cheers, everybody.
Have a great weekend.
See you guys.